Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa ashabi ajma'in. I hope everybody in our community is enjoying the first Friday of Ramadan and also the first day of Ramadan as we're fasting. Last night was our first night of Ramadan, and I hope that with this month, Allah Azza will bring great blessings to us, and He will also help us and alleviate us from this suffering of the COVID-19 virus. And I hope everyone's staying safe and they're enjoying their fast in the privacy of their own home. One of the topics that we're going to cover today is what is the best good deed? The best good deed. A lot of scholars tried to answer this, and one of them actually came up with a very good solution. Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, he said that from all of the good deeds you can imagine, from your fasting, from your siyam, from your qiyamul layl, from your giving good sadaqah, from donations, saying good things, birr al-walidain, all of these things, these are all excellent good deeds. And rather, it is in the time and in the place that actually determines the best good deed that you could possibly do. So it actually varies. So from time and place, it will vary. And in the middle of this Ramadan, the best good deed that we can do is fast this Ramadan, because this is what Allah Azza wa Jal had made obligatory upon us. Interestingly enough, though, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran, in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 112, He does mention some of the best good deeds that we possibly could do, and He does in order of tartib, which is an order of importance that He tells us that we should follow them. Such as what? Allah Azza wa Jal says, and He starts off with the most important thing we can do, and these are good deeds generally that we should follow and try to attain in our lifetime. And so this is the order that Allah Azza wa Jal said are those people who are mu'mineen, who are close to Him, because there are different levels of getting close to Allah. Some of us are just basic Muslims and we just care to practice the 5 pillars, which is obviously the shahada, the testimony of faith, praying, fasting, zakah, and hajj when we have the ability to do so, and then we're okay with that, and avoiding the major sins, and some Muslims are okay with that. But the more that you study this religion, the more that you understand the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the more that we start attaining for something higher. We want something more, and so then we strive for mu'mineen, and then we strive for muhsineen, and then we strive for those people who are just completely content with everything that Allah Azza wa Jal has ordained for them. It's a struggle in life, and this is called jihad in nafs. This is something that is highly rewarded, and all of the scholars, may Allah Azza wa Jal be pleased with them, they spoke about. But the first type of people that Allah Azza wa Jal told us that we should strive to be, He said in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 112, and we'll just recite the ayah first. He said, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. He said, التائبون العابدون الحامدون السائحون الراكعون الساجدون الآمرون بالمعروف والناهون عن المنكر والحافظون لحدود الله وبشر المؤمنين. That Allah Azza wa Jal specifically tells us about all of these groups of people, and these are all mu'mineen. And what we want to do is try to do all of these great deeds. So, but Allah Azza wa Jal starts off with at-ta'ibun. At-ta'ibun, those people who are constantly making tawbah to Allah, asking Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive them for their sins. And this is the most important time to do it. We're fasting. And also, remember, we covered this yesterday for those people who were live with us. And if you weren't, one of the best dua to make when you break your fast is to ask Allah to forgive all of the Muslims and Muslimat in the world. And the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah will forgive you for the amount of Muslims that are in the world. So if there's 1.6 or 8 billion people in the world, and Muslims in the world, and you ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to forgive them, then all of those bad deeds of 1.8 billion bad deeds, Allah Azza wa Jalla will forgive bi'idhnillah. And that's just such a blessing and a rahmah. But sometimes us as Muslims, we think we're good. We think we're okay. And we don't think that we're actually doing things incorrectly. So we forget to make tawbah. unless something really big happened, unless we fell very harshly and into sin or something like that. But alhamdulillah, in this case, Allah is reminding us that the people who are closest to Allah are those people who are constantly making tawbah and asking Allah for forgiveness, the most important thing. And you can never forget how, you can never underestimate how important tawbah is, because if you look at all of the prophets, and Allah Azza wa Jal even started with Adam alayhi salam, that went because he made tawbah after he made his mistake, Allah Azza wa Jal forgave him and elevated his status. So that's something from a very important lesson that we can learn from the get-go. And then he says, Al-Abidun, Al-Hamidun, Al-Sa'ihun. What is Al-Abidun? And this is where everybody gets to be as creative as they want, obviously within the realm of the Quran and Sunnah. Al-Abidun is those people who are worshiping consistently with Allah. And anytime you want to fall within one of these categories, you have to be consistent with it. So it's not enough for you to just be making tawbah one time a year and say, okay, I'm done. It's you consistently ask Allah Azza wa Jal for forgiveness. You consistently ask yourself, am I doing something wrong? Let me ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive me in Qiyamul Layl. I'm praying my Qiyam now. Never forget, and you're consistent with that. Oh Allah, forgive me. Oh Allah, forgive me. Oh Allah, forgive me. And there's a lot of benefits that come into that. And there's many lectures on forgiveness, and you can look them up. But we don't have. That's not the main focus right now. Al Abidun, this is general. Some people, Allah Azza wa Jal bless them with a lot of wealth. If Allah bless them with wealth, donate, but donate consistently. It's great. This is the month of Ramadan, and the Prophet ﷺ said, it was said about him that he used to be like the wind. Meaning what? He used to give with a great amount when Ramadan came. He never held back. This is something that we should also follow. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Your masjid, your not and they didn't even ask me to say this, but I'll tell you now, all of our masajid are in shambles right now. They rely on us for donations. Maybe one day bi'idhnillah will come up with a system that doesn't rely necessarily so much on donations, but why not take advantage? It's a blessing that we have a masjid that we're able to donate. Imagine if every masjid was fine and there was no one to take our donation, then where would we get the ajr of the sadaqah? So right now, some people have been given wealth, then guess what? Take the wealth and donate with it. Some people have been given time. Some people have a little extra time. Volunteer in the way that you're able to. There's a lot of organizations right now that need help volunteering. Al-Abidun is something general, and you yourself, you know your situation. Figure out how you could contribute to the ummah, but when you contribute to the ummah, be very consistent in it. Right? So if you're somebody who's monitoring a social media page, mashallah, may Allah reward you, be consistent in it. If you're somebody who's sitting there cleaning the masjid, be consistent in it. If you're somebody who's teaching Quran, be consistent in it. Giving a lecture, be consistent in it. No matter what you do, figure it out where your niche is and focus on that, because Aisha radiallahu anha, she reported the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that the most beloved deeds to Allah are the ones that are most consistent, even though they are few. Even though they may seem little, but you're consistent in it. This is something that Allah Azza wa Jal loves the most. And so let us not forget, whatever type of ibadah you're able to do within your realm, focus on that. And that's the second. What is after that? Al-Hamidun, Allah Azza wa Jal said. And this is something we have to practice, especially us being born and raised in Jersey. We're very rough around the edges sometimes, and we're very well known for this if you look around the United States. But we should not take on that type of trait. We should be those people who are very rough to deal with. Al-Hamidun are those people that no matter what happens to them, they're saying Alhamdulillah. They're pleased with the situation. They're saying all praise is due to Allah, because Allah has a hikmah of what happens to us. We're not very ratchet. We're not very angry. We're not responding in harsh manners. Al-Hamidun. But you have to be consistent in that. And you can sometimes find those people, and you kind of have a likeness to be closer to them. Why? Because in all honesty, when you meet those people who are constantly praising Allah and Alhamdulillah, 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 you find that people want to be close to them, right? Instead of the people that are always complaining, oh, Alhamdulillah, yeah, but we just got laid off. Corona is killing it, and this president is acting foolish, and the Alhamdulillah, but dot dot dot. Alhamdulillah stops at Alhamdulillah, and that's it. You complain only about your situation to Allah Azza wa Jal. That's all you need, because Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who helps you. Right? That's something very, very important that we should try to instill in ourselves, especially this Ramadan. And then Allah Azza wa Jal says, As-sa'ihun ar-raki'un as-sajidun. As-sa'ihun in the Quran, when you see this word as-sa'ihun, Ibn Abbas, Abu Hurairah, Sa'id ibn Jubair, Al-Hasan al-Basri, and many others, they said as-sa'ihun means as-sa'imun, means fasting. And here's something interesting. Most of us, when we were taught in Sunday school or when we were very young, that as-salah amud ad-din, that the prayer is the backbone of the religion. And so we were always taught that that's the most important thing. And yet here Allah Azza wa Jal put as-sa'ihun before salah, before ar-raki'un as-sajidun, because that's salah. And so the scholars said, is this the case that Ramadan, or especially the obligatory one, is more important than the Salah? And they debated. And it seems that there is actually a lot of evidence that shows that Ramadan, the month of Ramadan, is a more important pillar than Salah. Nonetheless, they're all important pillars and we should follow them all. But pay attention how blessed we are to have lived and being alive in this Ramadan and taking advantage of it, fasting and focusing on in our ibadah. Listen to this story about two companions, radiallahu anhum. One was martyred in the battlefield, and the other one did not die in the battlefield. He lived a year later, and then he passed away. It was narrated from Talha ibn Ubaidillah that two men from Bali' they came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they accepted Islam together. So here are two individuals, right? They started their Islam together on their journey. That is the most important deed, by the way, any non-Muslim could do, which is the Shahada. And there's obviously a great deal in there. The testimony of faith, believing in one God and that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last messenger sent to this world. And then Talha said, he said about these two people, he said one of them, he used to strive much harder than the other one. He used to strive very, very hard. And then the one who used to strive harder went out to fight and he was martyred. He was in fighting in jihad, and that was to fight against those people who were very oppressive and these kind of tyrannical regimes, and the way they deal with people. And he died on the battlefield. The other one stayed for a year longer. And then he passed away. Talha said, I saw in a dream that I was at the gate of paradise and I saw the two men. Someone came out from paradise and admitted the one who died last, the one who died a year later, and then came out and admitted the one who had been martyred. So the one who lived a year later entered paradise before the one who was martyred. And then they came back to me and said, the one who came out of paradise came back to me and said, go back, your time has not come yet. It's not your time for death, go back. Yani. And so this dream, Talha started telling the people that of his dream, and all of them were amazed by that, such to the extent that the dream reached the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, why are all of you so amazed? They said, Ya Rasulullah, the first one strove harder and he was martyred, but the second one was admitted to paradise before him. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he asked the companions, and this is the turning point where we have to understand, here is the reason why this person who lived a year later, who didn't die on the battlefield, but died, a regular death, not as a shaheed, he was admitted into paradise before. The Prophet ﷺ is going to explain to us. So this is the turning point of the hadith. They said, yes, Ya Rasulullah, he lived a year later, longer than the other one. He said, and in that year, didn't Ramadan come and he fasted? The first thing he mentions is that he was able to fast an extra Ramadan. You understand how much blessings this is? And that's the reason that the when Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Qadr about just the night of Laylatul Qadr. Can you imagine this? It's better than 1,000 months doing that, those good deeds that you've done that night continuously. That's 83 plus years of good deeds continuously, just in that one night, let alone fasting this Ramadan. So he said, didn't a year come? And that in that year there was Ramadan and he fasted it. And in that year there was the obligatory prayers and he prayed them. They said, yes, Ya Rasulullah, he did. The Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said the difference between them is greater than the difference between the heaven and earth. And now you understand a few things here. When the companions would come back from the battlefield, they would say, we left the jihad al-kabir, وذهبنا إلى الجهاد we left the jihad الصغير وذهبنا إلى الجهاد الكبير, that we left the small war and now we're heading towards the big war. Living for the sake of Allah is much more difficult than dying for the sake of Allah. There's a lot more rewards in that. Why? Because of all of the different good deeds you can do. But nonetheless, obviously, the shuhada have their place with Allah, skipping the grave life, and so many rewards. May Allah Azza wa Jal reward them and allow them to be written of the highest martyrs, inshallah. So now you understand another thing, that why the companions used to take 6 months before Ramadan, preparing for Ramadan, saying, "Oh, Allahumma ballighna Ramadan." It's been reported that the companions would be asking Allah to make dua for Allah to, "Oh Allah, allow us to witness Ramadan," 6 months before the deed. And the way that you see the value of a deed, never forget this, the value of a deed is the amount and the length that it takes for you and the effort that it takes for you preparing for it. And that's also the benefits you'll reap from it. So if the Sahaba used to take 6 months before Ramadan asking Allahumma ballighna Ramadan, and then after Ramadan, Allahumma taqabbal minna Ramadan, oh Allah, accept our Ramadan. The 6 months after, the whole year they're thinking about Ramadan, and for us we're only thinking about it the moment we start fasting, which is some of us the morning of this Fajr, before Salat al-Fajr. They're almost thinking about it year round. What's the only thing that you're going to be focused more than that is Hajj. And that's the reason it's a once in a lifetime, because you're saving consistently for it. But Ramadan, they used to take 6 months preparing for it. And now you also understand why the Sahaba had so much khushu' in their salah. Because it was everything they did before their salah that they would prepare so that they met with Allah Azza wa Jal and they prayed to Allah in the most dignified and humble manner. So, see, these are the key things that we have to understand. Taking advantage of this Ramadan, never forget that, act like it might be your last Ramadan. What would you have loved to do in this Ramadan that's pleasing to Allah, in this month that Allah Azza wa Jal chose of all of the other months, of the night of Qiyam al-Layl that Allah Azza wa Jal chose out of all the nights, and especially the last 10 nights which bi'idhnillah we're allowed to witness. And after a salah, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Allah Azza wa Jal said, Al-amiruna bil-ma'ruf wal-nahuna 'anil munkar. Those people who are always giving good advice to their Muslim friends and their family. How so? Those people who are enjoining good and forbidding what is evil. Ma'ruf is something that is our religion, what is well known within our religion, giving advice about something that's Islamically permissible, something that's recommended. Somebody backbites you, the thing that you come back and say is like, "Oh no, you should go back and say this and do this." There's no way they could disrespect you like that. And yet you know that what you should be, the advice that you should be giving your friend or your sister or your brother is, "Hey, listen, don't let these people get to you. Ask Allah Azza wa Jal to forgive them, to forgive you, and move on. Don't hold grudges. Don't continue the negative cycle." So it is incumbent upon us as Muslims and Muslimat that we give good advice and we try within our means, to always abstain from the evil and enjoin what is good. This is something that we should do all the time. And if you have a friend, for example, who and we always get these kind of questions, somebody who doesn't pray, somebody who smokes, somebody who drinks, somebody who doesn't fast, how do I deal with them? And this is the sad reality of our ummah. And the way that you deal with them is you give them advice in private and not in public, and you speak to them. And the key thing, you never give up on them. I want to make sure you understand that. You never give up on them, no matter how harsh the words they say, no matter what they do. You never give up on them. Have the sabr, have the patience that that the Prophet ﷺ had, and he wanted us to have as well. And then Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ, and those people who observe the limits set by Allah, which is what? That when we hear, and this is something that we have to be very mindful of as Muslims. A lot of times we hear the question, it says, "Oh, is it haram to do ABC or is it makruh?" And the famous ones such as what? Is cigarettes haram or are they makruh? Number one, the Sahaba, they used to treat the makruhat as al-mahrumat, which is what? The things that are the abominable acts, the disliked acts in the religion, they used to treat them as the prohibited acts. And do you know why? Because if they got close to the gray area, to the question mark area, to the disliked area, then if they passed that area, they did something haram. But if they stayed away from that area and they messed up and they accidentally fell into the gray area, if you will, or the makruhat by accident, then they still didn't get a sin. You get that? But for some reason, us as Muslims, we just want to know halal or haram, and that's the underlying the underlying thing that will move us whether we do something or not, which is a good thing. But we should take a higher step and a better approach, which is focusing on the things that will not allow us to even enter into those sins. And that's why we have to that's why when Allah just says what hafidun hududillah, that if something seems questionable to you, stay away from it. And the Prophet ﷺ recommended that, and that is the characteristic of a mu'min, those people who are focused so much about these things. And then Allah says, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And all of these people, all who are focusing on these categories, are mu'mineen. And that's something that the companion said, the scholar said, if you want to know how to become a mu'min or a muhsin, then read the ayah before or read the ayah after. In this case, Allah ended with وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and give glad tidings to the mu'minun and al-mu'minin. And this is why, so that we can read this entire ayah and focus on it. Remember, it's Surah At-Tawbah, verse 112, and we should try and take it a step-by-step approach. The first thing we should focus on is At-Tawbah, asking Allah to forgive us, continuously asking Allah to forgive us. This is one of the most important things. And then follow the rest of the different categories that Allah mentions in this ayah. And I ask Allah that He will accept from us this Ramadan, that He will accept from us all those people who died from this disease, from this plague. May Allah Azza wa Jal forgive them for their sins, and may Allah Azza wa Jal reunite us with our families in Al Jannat Al Firdaus. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal that we can benefit as much as we can from this Ramadan, even if we're praying Qiyamul Layl on our own and we're praying our Taraweeh on our own. This is also from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that he prayed Taraweeh by himself in his house or with his family in his house. And so this is also a nice way that we can revive the Sunnah as well. So we should look at the positives of the situation and ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept from us. Jazakumullah khair. And I hope that anything I said that offended anyone, please forgive me. And if I said something good, that is from Allah Azza wa Jal. And that is a ni'mah from Him. And I hope He can continue to bless us with that. Alhamdulillah.